we make more content, we produce more social media, we just push a little bit harder to get new clients. But the reality is, when we opt for this approach, when we push a little bit harder, sometimes that doesn't feel so good to our clients and prospective clients. In fact, this, my friends, is how it feels to your customers and prospects when you push a little too hard.
Howdy, y'all. This here's Mike. Down at Mike's Golf Shop, where we buy golf. That's right. We buy golf clubs. Mike's Golf Shop. Come on over here. We buy golf clubs. Over at Mike's Golf Shop. Come on down here. We buy golf clubs. That's right. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs. We buy golf clubs.
What does he buy? Golf clubs. Look, if you're from Tennessee in the USA, he's one of your folks, so congratulations. Look, I will give that an A for message consistency, call to action. Very, very consistent. Lower marks for subtlety. But this is how it feels to your customers when you come on a little too strong, and you don't have to do that. There is another way. Here's the truth. To succeed with social media, or with search for that matter, in order for that to work, it's not about pushing harder. It's not about spending more necessarily. If you want it to work, your customers and your fans need to help it spread. Right? The best way to get customers, the best way to get attention is for your customers to do that for you. But there's a couple things that have to happen for that to work. How do you actually do that? Well, first, if you're going to make social content, if you're going to make content of any kind, it has to be somebody's absolute favorite thing of that type in the world. So many people ask me, because I do a lot of podcasting. I'm the host of the Social Pros podcast, host of the Standing Ovation podcast as well. And my team and I produce a dozen or so shows. And people say, well, should I start a podcast? And I say, well, yes, if you have a way for your podcast to be somebody's favorite show in the world. The problem with most social and the problem with most content of any kind is that it tries to please too many people. All of us, including myself, we all tell ourselves the same lie, right? We say, well, look, the problem is, the reason I can't succeed, the reason nobody pays attention to me on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or Reddit or TikTok or beyond is that they just don't have time, see? They don't have time to pay attention. They don't have time to go to the YouTube channel. They don't have time to sit on a webinar. And that is absolutely not true. It's not about time. Because when you give somebody what they want in the format they prefer, and you give it to them when they need it, the time necessary to consume that thing magically appears. See? Relevancy creates time, and relevancy creates attention. Relevancy is the killer app. Relevancy is the coin of the realm. So if you're going to do something in social media, and I suspect you are if you're paying attention to what I'm saying to you right now, you have to ask yourself a different question, right? You have to ask yourself this: what is the perfect content for a specific audience versus what is pretty good content for a broader audience, right? Specificity is your friend, not your enemy. Now, the second thing you got to do to stop random acts of social and succeed with this is that your content has to be found and consumed, right? We're all fighting against the same algorithms, the same people sort of ignoring what we're doing. And in order to fight against that, we have to make sure that content is locatable by our customers. Look, the truth is that for most of us, fewer than 1% of our actual audience in social media sees what we post. If you have 100,000 fans on a Facebook page and you put something on that Facebook page, in almost every case, fewer than 1,000 of them will see it. How do you fight against that? Well, I think you need to think like a television network and create shows. Every TV network in the world, ESPN, NBC, Lifetime, HGTV, Food Network, et cetera, they all have different shows, right? Thursday at 4 is a show. Saturday at 2 is a show. It is a consistent execution, and you need to do the same thing. Stop random acts of social. Why would we do that? What are the benefits of social media shows? Well, first, you get a lot of efficiencies in terms of how you create content and promote content. When you're doing similar things over and over, you get faster and better at it, and you gain efficiencies over time. Second, as you do the same kind of work in social repeatedly, your audience will notice it and tune in a way that they simply cannot when you approach social media from a random standpoint. Third, because your audience will find it, they will engage with it. Because they will engage with it, that tells the algorithms in social media that what you are publishing has merit, and they consequently will show it to more people. The rich get richer, you see. Fourth, when you do something consistently, it creates downstream memorability and awareness, right? Doing something once is unlikely to break through. Sometimes things go viral, but usually they don't. If you do the same kind of thing over and over and over, eventually it starts to take root. And it allows you to repeat your calls to action, right? Again, if you're going to do a one-off in social media, maybe have a very compelling call to action, because it's a one-off, the chance of it actually succeeding is not very high. But if you have a show that you're going to do over and over and over, the chance of that call to action being acted upon at some point go up mathematically. So what constitutes a show? What are the ingredients of a show? Well, first, a show requires you to have a consistent target audience, or maybe a couple different target audiences, right? You're trying to reach the same people, the same types of people each time out. Second, consistent format. A show is a show in that it is executed and produced the same way. It is a podcast. It is a video show. It is an ebook. It is a series of interviews on Facebook. It's not one day an interview and the next day it's an interactive quiz. That's not a show. That is, again, random, which is what we don't want. Third, a consistent distribution window and a consistent amplification schema, meaning that if you're going to have a show that is episodic, I'll talk more about in a second, it's always Wednesdays at 2, right? Just like a regular television network. And you always amplify it the same way. You always use 2 organic tweets to promote the episode and 1 paid Instagram post, or whatever the circumstances might be. And the calls to action should be consistent, right? You're asking the audience to do the same thing every time they engage with this particular type of social media content. There are 3 types of shows. 3 types of shows I want you to create. First, most importantly, the binge-worthy show. This is the episodic, consistent execution, which is most similar to what we see in many cases in television, right? So these binge-worthy shows are usually top of the funnel, right? So broader. They're not necessarily about your product. They're not answering detailed product information. It is more entertainment focused and broader education type of content. Usually these shows are video series, YouTube, LinkedIn video, Facebook video, IGTV, or audio, a podcast. Not always, but that's usually how it works. Pretty high production value because you're going to commit to this on usually a weekly basis. Some are daily, some are less than weekly, but the most common cadence for a binge-worthy show is weekly. Your mileage may vary. Call to action on these kind of shows is not buy stuff, right? It's not listen to my podcast, give me money. That's very abrupt. Call to action on a binge-worthy show is to subscribe. What you want to have happen is an individual person finds the show, likes the show, and says, I want to listen or watch this show every week, right? So the CTA is subscribe, not buy. Here's an example of a binge-worthy show, a project that my team and I at Convince and Convert do for Oracle. It's called On the Fly. Each week we have a different marketing expert create a little video with a marketing tip. Here's one from Ian Cleary.
Hey, this is Ian Cleary from Razor Social, and this is Marketing on the Fly, small bites of marketing training dispensed while traveling. I'm in Dublin, Ireland at the moment. I'm at the train station. It's my first part of my journey on the way to the US. So my tip today is about influencer outreach. Instead of reaching out to an influencer and immediately looking for something from them, focus on what they want, not what you want. So I'll give you 2 examples. Imagine if you want a guest post on their website. Well, instead of reaching out, ask them about guest posting, why don't you reach out with something of value? For example, say there are some keywords you notice that they're not ranking for that could drive them a lot of potential traffic. Of course, the influencer wants lots of traffic, so you're offering something of value. The second example is if the influencer has a book, they want to get reviews, they want to get ratings, they want to get more promotion of the book. So reach out to them and say, hey, I'm going to write a testimonial. Where do you want me to write the testimonial? And do you want a video testimonial? So focus on what they want initially, not what you want, and you'll get a lot better results with your influencer outreach. This is Ian Cleary, all the way from Dublin, Ireland, going to the US, and this is Marketing on the Fly, small bites of marketing training dispensed while traveling. Go to onthefly.expert and binge watch the marketing training.
So we do that every single week with a different marketing influencer. A terrific example of a binge-worthy show. It goes on the LinkedIn page and the blog and the YouTube channel of Oracle at the same time every single week. Closer to my own life, I have a podcast called Social Pros about enterprise social media management. This is an episode we did earlier this year with Alex from FedEx. We're now at 424 episodes of the show weekly since 2012. Second type of show are special event shows. So this would be in television land, something like the Emmys or the Grammys or the ESPYs or a special broadcast look back or The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary recently. It's that kind of thing. It's a special program that occurs once or over a short run. In our world, that might be something like a webinar or an ebook or a report. Usually these special event shows are mid-funnel, right? So it's not super detailed product information, and it's not very broad entertainment and information like the binge-worthy show. It's in between, right? So it's equal parts entertainment and information. It is exactly what we're doing here at this summit. This is an example of a special event show. The summit doesn't happen every week, and it's mid-funnel in terms of its orientation. As mentioned, these are often white papers, webinars, reports. Most of these special event shows are characterized as such because they gather data, right? High production value, as you see right here in this program, and they're usually monthly or quarterly. So you're going to want to try and do maybe a monthly report, a monthly ebook, a monthly webinar, possibly quarterly, something like that. Certainly not weekly in most businesses, but still on a semi-consistent basis. And the call to action on these type of shows is to download or register RSVP, etc. What you're trying to do is gather data. You're gathering data from prospects to create a lead and push them further down into the funnel. And that's true whether you're B2B or B2C. Same idea. For example, here's a sort of special event show from our friends at Podium. We do a lot of work with them. This is a webinar about text messaging, 3 reasons your business needs text messaging more than you think. This is a terrific complete guide within a companion webinar. You register, you get both. There you go, right? Third type of show. News and updates, right? NBC has news, ABC has news, CNN has news, Fox News is news, etc. And these are the regular updates that you have in social media, which is what most people do in social media, period. They only have this kind of show, and that's the wrong approach. These are usually mid to low funnel. And the way to think of this kind of social media content is that it's most similar to what you might put in an email newsletter. It's like, hey, this thing happened. Want to keep you informed. Want to make sure you're on top of this, right? It's little updates for your customers, fans, and prospects rendered in a social media environment. So these are often short posts, product announcements, content that is sort of time sensitive. Here's what's happened in this week, tonight's specials, etc. Lowest production value because it doesn't have a long-term shelf life. Most of this content is valid for a few days and then it doesn't really matter anymore. So you're not going to invest tons of time and money into it in most cases. Usually this content is daily. This is the stuff that you put in social media every day, and then you use this content to surround your special events and your binge-worthy shows. Calls to action on these are typically either, hey, no call to action needed, just want to make sure you know this customer, or click on this to go to a web page, right? So it's either a click or information. Here's an example from my friends at Cardinal Spirits. They're a distillery here in Bloomington, Indiana, where I live. Like many distilleries, they have pivoted during the pandemic to creating hand sanitizer. Here, though, they're saying that fresh off the bottling line vodka, we now have vodka. We have restocked vodka, right? So they're just letting people know, guess what? Now we have vodka. Great example of a news and update via social. One of the ways to keep track of this, to make sure that you are creating all 3 types of shows and that you're not sort of crossing the streams and you're keeping very intentional about your calls to action as well, is to use what we call a content execution brief. And so for every single thing you ever put in social media, I want you to consider using one of these briefs. You say, what's the name of the show? Who are we targeting with the show? What are the questions we're answering with this show? What type of show is it? Binge-worthy, special event, news and update. Where is it? Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? Is it video? Is it a haiku? What type of show is it? And then the end of the form looks like this, atomization. So if it's a bigger project, like a special event or a binge-worthy show, what are the smaller pieces that we could spin off of that? Highlight reels, infographics, greatest hits, etc. And then at the end, what are the desired behaviors after people consume this show? So if somebody looks at the Cardinal Spirits vodka post, what do we want them to do? Best thing they could do, get in their car, come to Cardinal Spirits, buy vodka. That's number 1, right? What's number 2? they go to the website and order vodka online. Number 3, something else, right? So for every single piece of social media content you create, you will be much better off, trust me, if you actually overtly write down on this form, what are the 3 things in order you want people to do after they consume that content, regardless of show format. I want you to have this brief. Usually we include this in social media strategy engagements that we do at Convince and Convert, but I want you to use this because I know it will make you better. Just go here to cnc.ly/SEJ brief, all lowercase, friends. Make sure you use the lowercase. And you can download it right now. It won't cost you anything, as a PDF or as an Excel file. So please take it, use it. Any questions, let me know. You can see my Twitter handle there at the bottom of the screen. 3 takeaways for you. Number 1, to gain attention, ironically, perhaps paradoxically, be specific, not broad. Second, random social media rarely works. It works less than ever because of the algorithms. Customers and algorithms want content consistency from you. Third, use 3 types of shows to add order and effectiveness and awesome to your social media program. And you, yes, you will reap the benefits. Thanks so much for having me. I am Jay Baer from Convince and Convert. ConvinceAndConvert.com is our main site. More than 3,000 articles for marketers just like you. And I'll be back in just a little bit to answer some questions. Take care.
Thanks, Jay. Great presentation. And next up for the day, we have Mary Davies, president at Beanstalk Internet Marketing. And she's going to be talking about using your company's social media to survive and even thrive in tough times. Again, if you're on Twitter and you want to quote her, her Twitter handle is @Beanstalk, and use the hashtag SEJ Live. We will have, again, a Q&A at the end of Mary's presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them and we'll cover them in the Q&A. Go ahead, Mary, take it away.
Hi guys, it's Mary Davies here from Beanstalk Internet Marketing. I am super excited to be presenting the session today, and I hope that you're excited to be here with me. So you can learn a little bit about who I am and what I do by glancing at this slide. You can connect with me on Twitter. I'm at Beanstalk, and I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So I'll chat with you more on a personal level after I get through this session, I'm sure. But let's jump right in, okay? So why am I here today? I'm here to share with you how to connect with people and focus on the human element that can create brand loyalty and last not only through the tough times, which we're all experiencing a lot of right now, but for the years and years to come. So there's going to be 3 takeaways that you can implement right away. They're going to be a person, be a source of joy, go above and beyond. Some of these might seem simple, like being a person, but it's a little bit trickier when you're actually a brand. So we're going to cover that, and let's jump right into it. So being a person, number 1 rule, followers are friends and they are not food. So you need to remember that you're going to connect with them as a person. You're not going to gobble them up and try and sell them stuff all of the time. And a really great way to do that is to talk with, not at your followers. Social media is really their space. And this is a space that you need to be respectful of as a brand. This is a space where people like to get together and share pictures of their babies, look at cat videos, maybe post what they ate for dinner. This is not really a space that people go to be sold. We do have ads and things like that that will throw that out there at them, but that's not what they're there for. So we need to remember that and be respectful of that. So I like to implement a 50-50 rule. Half of our content is going to be connection-based, half of it promotional. I sometimes will err more to the connection side as well. A really great way to find this balance is going to be to put your sales pushes in your paid ads and really that connection type content in your profile on your just regular page, or whatever it might be. I keep using page, that's on Facebook, but you know what I mean. So anyway, but yeah, we can go a little heavy on that sales pitch when we're in the ad space. People are expecting that, but when they come onto your page, we want to create an environment that they actually want to be a part of and actually will seek out and want to communicate on. And you can do that in the form of, you know, having discussions about tips for things, or hosting contests, or just having really fun, engaging content that people want to comment on and be a part of. Something that we need to really remember to do when we're being a person is to take the time to empathize and relate to struggles and frustrations. Social media has a lot of complaining in it. There's a lot of people who have a lot of big feelings about what went wrong, right? So we need to really make sure that when we're experiencing that as a social media manager, that we're taking the time to try to find those areas where we can connect with them and relate to them, and it'll make them feel just that much more like, you know, they're being heard, and that you're not just the brand, and you know, you can send a DM to say Walmart if you want to, and you think I'm talking to Walmart, you forget that you're actually talking to a person on the other end of that. But if we take the time to let them know that we understand and that we're relating, then it really breaks that barrier down, and we can have a communication that can create long-lasting actual connections and relationships. And then also, you need to really remember that your long day is not their problem. So they're probably having a long day when they're having their rant, and you're probably at the end of your day at times as well, and you're not really in the mood for it. But it's your job when you're on the business side of that to take a step back and to make sure that you're representing the business well, and you're taking the time to just sort of relate to the struggle that they're experiencing. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But here's a little example of how when we can take some empathy and relate to a struggle, we can actually really form that strong connection. So for one of my clients, I have a recommendation, which is always fantastic. Somebody is saying super fast shipping, even during tough times. We take this opportunity to not just say thank you, but also relate to them and go, the past few weeks have been challenging for all of us, but it gives us great pride to meet your expectations. This is a time where we can go, hey, I am a person, and yes, I'm struggling just like you, and we're in this together. Being a part of the group and the discussion is really a great way to be a person as well. You can comment on, like, love, react, whatever, to comments, reviews, and shares, all of that. It's your way of just sort of acknowledging the time that they've taken to communicate with your brand or to share your brand's voice with their friends. It's a simple thing. You can just put a little reaction on. I prefer to be able to put a comment on, but you can't always do that. Also, using their language is a really great way to sort of be a part of a group as well. So I have a client that's in this sort of ski snowboard space. Post up a picture of a beautiful ski day, blue skies, fresh snow. I go, what a beauty of a bluebird day. That's not really the lingo that a lot of people would use, but as a skier and a snowboarder, that is the lingo that I would use. So using that just helps the brand be a part of that group. So do that when you can. Try to make sure you're doing it right, though, because you will be mocked if you do it wrong. So careful on that. And speaking of mocking, let loose. A little humor goes a long way, right? I'm sure that all of you have seen Wendy's. I think that they are the queen of letting humor sort of connect with the user. Here's an example of, actually, this is a small town that I grew up in when I was a kid. They posted a COVID update. Playgrounds are now open. However, use is not recommended. Now, they did further that discussion and sort of give some tips, but rightfully so, there was a quick reply to say, most ridiculous COVID post I've ever. They could have argued that. They could have ignored it. There's a lot of ways that they could have gone around it, but they decided to come back with humor and said, really? Because we thought the announcement of the skate park being open only to close it for construction a day later was pretty ridiculous. It was great. It sort of subdued everything. It relaxed the conversation. It had a lot of really positive reactions, as you can see. And it was just a way to bring humor in, create that connection as a person. A brand doesn't really talk that way, right? So they were able to just form that human connection and have a discussion past that. Using wording that reinforces you're a person is a great thing to do as well. So personalized salutations, making sure, thanks for sharing your photo with us, Mary, rather than just thanks for sharing your photo. It's showing that you've taken that connection step. You've said, I see you as a person, and I'm acknowledging that. Using terms like community, group, family, these are great ways to really connect and to bring people into that space and want to connect with you. So if I post up something that we're so grateful for our amazing community, it's actually creating this sense of, oh, I want to be in that. I want to be part of that. It almost gives it like its own little bubble, and people are going to actually come to it and want to be in it. Everyone likes to belong, so you're sort of creating that sense of belonging for your followers when you use that type of wording. Introduce yourself and use your name when you're doing messaging. So, hi Dave, it's Mary here. It's a great way to do that. It's right off the bat, we're personal, right? So the only time I caution against this is if you have too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen, I guess, too many people answering those messages. It can get really disjointed and awkward if you've got, hi, it's Mary, and then 2 hours later, oh, hi, it's Sarah. So you have to be, use it cautiously. But if it fits your brand and it fits your team, then go for it. Talking to them where they are at is a great way to sort of connect as well. So leaving your own profile and liking their posts. I go on to Instagram. I have a client in the soap making industry. Look up, hashtag for soap making. I have almost 1 million posts there. I can go as a brand out into the wild, like the different posts, comment, oh, what a beautiful soap that is. And a lot of these people have never experienced my brand at all. And their first interaction with me is incredibly positive because I'm just there complimenting them, really. And so our first step really is just this brand connection. Now, a lot of that that works for kind of gaining new followers as well, and maybe making new relationships, but it's also really helpful to do for those people who are following you and part of you, and it creates that connection. And we do that for this client a lot, and people love it when we go, oh, I really love what you're making. I've actually seen a connection to that, and then them coming back and participating more and more and more. So yeah, just being part of that and where they are in that space. And then, of course, being a part of the larger community, if you have an opportunity to sponsor, donate a prize, whatever it might be. So let's talk about being a source of joy, because I think this is one of my very favorite things to do when I'm in the social media space, because it should be a really happy, positive space. Sometimes you can go to the negative a lot. So I like to bring joy to that space as much as possible. So we want to offer people the chance to participate in positivity. It can be a really negative space there. So be that source of joy that they're looking for. This is a post that I had put up with a client. This was beginning of March. We had already planned a contest to launch at that time. And this was prior to COVID sort of really ballooning. And it, got rolling. Everything was really great. But as sort of things started to balloon and coronavirus land, the brand itself started to really be hesitant to be pushing this messaging out. They thought it was too celebratory, a little too joyous, maybe offensive because of that. And I really was like, no. I think people really want this positivity. They want this to be there. We did actually end up having to pull back for a while just to sort of appease, but they came around, and so that was good. But when they did come back around, and we did start to push this out again, and this was sort of later into March, we had these amazing responses. Good time to win something. We could all use a little help right now. Thanks so much for the chance. With so many Canadians feeling the pinch, I'm in Canada, by the way, due to COVID, it's very timely and perceptive. Thank you. It was so much positivity, and they were afraid that maybe it would be too much positivity, and I don't know if that's the case. But so we high-fived ourselves. That's good. This is what they tried to put out for a little bit. Now, I'm not judging them. We don't know this stuff. Sometimes we just have to try it and see what happens. And this was a trial, right? And it didn't go great. So they put out, along with the masses, everybody was putting something out to sort of be, we're in this together. A lot of the sort of, I guess, positive, but with a negative undertone messaging that a lot of brands pushed out. I understand the desire to do that, but I think it was getting a little bit overwhelming for people. Now, what went wrong here in this particular instance was that they included a link to their website, both in the image that accompanied this and in the text of the post. And that came across as basically sort of using this event to promote their own website. So the first comment we had was, you enjoy the lockdown, shame on you. The imagery had a person in their home cozied up. It didn't fly. When my son took a look at it, he said, oh, that's cringy. And he's 20. And I was like, yeah, okay. So we pulled that. We went back to the contest, and all is well. Never react to negativity. Find a positive way to respond. I know sometimes that's really hard, but we need to make sure that we take a pause if necessary, like prior to responding. And it might just be, I need to go run around the room for a minute, or take a walk outside, or whatever it might be, grab a cup of tea. But we need to make sure that we're in a good frame of mind so that we can come into that conversation in a positive way, ready to sort of take whatever is going to come at us if it's negative, which sometimes, it is. And then always, begin with gratitude. Let's start this off on a positive note. So thank you for taking the time to reach out. We really appreciate the feedback. So sorry that you had a hard time can come after that. Let's start with that positive note, and then we can go into the apologies, but just really get that light sort of gratitude as your first messaging. And then acknowledge each of their concerns point by point. Really, this helps you to help them feel like you're reading and hearing and understanding their concerns. And it also helps you to sort of calm the conversation, especially if it's that rant style that often comes at you. And then you can just sort of tick each point off as you go through it, and really find out, you know, the areas that you still need to address over the communication. So just keeping those responses simple and easy to digest is really key too. Try not to rant back and forth, and it will help them to see that you really care, that you're noticing and listening to what their concerns are, and you're treating each of the individual concerns with respect. Adopting a positive and supportive brand voice is massively important, and it's incredibly lucrative. So I have this example here, and this was actually a client of mine. They were having some issues with their website, and this person she could not place her order for the life of her. And you'll notice the date highlights here. This conversation took place over 2 days, and I did not think that we could keep someone on the hook that long, to be honest. But she was having trouble placing the order, and we had a lot of back and forth conversations. We do not sell something that she couldn't get somewhere else. There's tons of massive competitors that she could easily have just abandoned us and said, you know what, this isn't working, I'm going to go over there. But we kept this very constant positive communication style with her that was very understanding and real. You can see here, you know, one of our last replies to her was, let me know if you run into any other issues. It's usually super easy, and I'm really sorry for all the trouble you've had. We're acknowledging, we're appreciative, we're chatting with her, and she ends up, you know, telling us in the end here, as I'm a first-time customer, that really made a great first impression of your company. So someone who literally could not place an order for 2 days left saying, I have an amazing first impression of your company. So that's what adopting a positive and supportive voice can do for you. Sharing positive feedback with your community, that's actually from your community, is a really great way to sort of just keep that positivity rolling on your profile. People will see that they're being acknowledged, and they'll get excited to see their review up there. They'll also see when they're not up there, and they'll go, oh, I need to go write a recommendation because I want to be featured in that. And it also just, honestly, it just brings that positive voice and essence, I guess, to that profile. And it's just reminding people that, yeah, people do look at you in a positive light. People do enjoy you as a brand. And it's a great reminder. And we don't want to gloat about it. So this is different than saying, you know, just highlighting one review or a testimonial, because that actually can look as a sales tool almost. When we do it in this respect, it's actually just about our community. So we are actually sharing this amazing review, which does work as a sales tool. But ultimately, what people are seeing when they're looking at it is a post about a community that they want to be a part of. Last but not least, we're going to go above and beyond. So we're going to sacrifice where we can to support our current clients and customers. I say current being like the bold here, because while we can potentially grow in this time for sure, it's not going to be as likely as, you know, outside of our current pandemic, right? So we really need to focus in on keeping that current customer base that we have very happy. Word of mouth is great. That's going to pass on, and you can grow in that way. But we're not going to focus our messaging and our posts and all of that on growing the brand necessarily in this time. We're going to really focus in on keeping those connections strong with those current customers that we have. We can do that by offering maybe more coupons and discounts than normal. Everyone's a little tight on money right now, maybe unless you're in like the mask making business, that might be a little different, or hand sanitizer, but most people are a little tight. You can make off one-off exceptions to rules, you know, whether it's a return policy or whatever, offering payment plans if that applies to you. Giving freebies is a really great one, you know, just throw in whatever. I have one client who puts candies in her boxes, and it's fantastic. So really just investing in customer appreciation as much as you can. and highlight what you're not doing. This is, or what you're not doing, what you are doing that others aren't doing. This is like my favorite tip, I think, out of all of this. So if you want to just take some time, look at the comments and questions on your competitor profiles. You can also search for related groups. So in the soap making one, there's lots of groups, right? So I can go in there and see what are people complaining about, the hiccups that they're finding when they're trying to place orders. And one of the common ones was shipping times, or certain bottles being out of stock because of higher demand right now, that sort of thing. And then you can also read Google, Yelp, Facebook reviews, all of those things. So look to these places where your competitors are, and also where your client base is that's outside of your own page, and find out where are those roadblocks, where are there's areas where you can really point out that you've got that going on and you are offering that and you are the solution. Here's a great way that we've done this for one client. Yes, we are open and shipping fast. This is the cover photo on their Facebook page. And we also put that messaging out in ads and in lots of different posts and all sorts of different ways, shapes and forms. But slow shipping was a big complaint that we're seeing everywhere. So we're highlighting that that's not happening with us. So we're going to end this a real quick look at what I'm doing as a business. I've got about a minute and a half, so we'll get through it as quick as can. But me and my husband, my business partner, have decided for our business that we really wanted to be there for our customers. So we're reducing rates for some. We've even offered free services for some that are really struggling, people, especially in the tourism industry, that, they're going, I'm sorry, we have to cut ties, but, that's, we don't have any money coming in. And so we're in a position where we can step in and say, you know what, we don't want you to be hurting anymore. Let's help you through this. And they're going to be there on the other side. They're not going to have to go looking for a new marketing company when things start to turn around. And we're really just upping our services and boosting them in any way that we can, being there for them in any way that, we can sort of afford to do as a company. And just being available to be there for them and talk as business owner to business owner as well, and just go, yeah, I understand the struggles that you're going through. We're having really long days too, and we're having, our funds are slowing down as well coming in. So really taking that time again to relate and empathize with the struggles that they're going through. We're experiencing that as well, and really just doing everything we can to maintain those strong connections that we have built with our clients over so many years, because they're our friends. And we need them as much as they need us. Thanks for being here today, guys. Really appreciated it. Here's my cheat sheet. Take that with you. All right. We'll see you soon.
Really great presentation, everyone. I mean, really, really amazing information in the decks. I mean, I was lucky enough to get to see them in advance, but I mean, just really seeing all the questions come in. I mean, it's clear that this is something that's super impactful. And I think it's also really important for, I think everybody to really appreciate the fact that, we're at a time period, and I'm sure both of you know this, where the importance of quality has never been, more important. And we always talk about that in SEO as like content is king, but it's not about ranking in this regard. It's not about, getting pages indexed. In this point, in this place, and what we're really seeing the conversation about is about being really amazing in what you present to your audience and your customers. And I think that the demand for amazing communication and product and interactions has increased online, where I think it was not as expected in the past. So I think it's a really great discussion, and I'm really happy to see you both kind of passionately speaking about these topics. I do want to dive into some Q&A. We have quite a few questions. I'm going to do my best to kind of consolidate some of them, but please bear with me. And then if you have not asked your questions, what are you waiting for? Get in that chat box and throw those questions in there now. Even if we run out of time here, I would definitely expect that both of these individuals will likely stick around and answer some of your questions afterwards and interact with you. So definitely take the time. Jay, I want to start out with you for a quick question, because you went first and the questions came in that way. But there's some interesting questions that I'm going to kind of put together, right? And essentially, it comes down to creating shows. I think that we can all agree that that's an amazing idea, and it's something that we know works. Typically, whenever we're putting somebody up on a pedestal and talking about the things they've done, we love to look at these shows as a place of doing that. So it's something that's a beautiful thing, but it's not always easy to do, to actually create quality, right? I mean, sometimes people don't like the way somebody's voice sounds, or the dialogue is slow, or it doesn't really work. So how do you create content and the questions here are more about, like, if I don't have really high quality content, how can I create that content? And also secondarily, how can I get that in front of somebody without being annoying? Everything feels like I'm spamming. So how do I promote my content and not have it seem like I'm being spammy?
So the first thing is, I don't believe that quality is necessarily the prime directive. It's consistency, right? So random acts of social are the problem. That doesn't mean that everything you create has to be extraordinary. Probably shouldn't suck, but it doesn't have to be. This isn't a creative contest necessarily. Second, the types of shows that I'm referencing, while many examples that I illustrated today are in fact multimedia executions. They're videos, they're podcasts. However, by no means is that the only way you can do this. For example, many people are familiar with regular episodic Twitter chats. There's lots of Twitter chats out there. That is a show, right? Every Thursday at 9 or 2 or 1 or whatever, you have a Twitter chat about a topic. That is a show. It is episodic. It is consistent. It's the same target audience. It's the same production premise. One of the greatest shows in the history of social media, which is now a decade old, if not longer, was called, and still exists, called Humans of New York. I'm sure Mary's familiar with it. And it's simply every day, it's a photo, usually, and a quick paragraph or so explaining the life situation of an interesting person who lives in New York. That requires a phone and a paragraph, right? So you don't have to be Ron Howard to do a social media show. And in fact, Brent, I feel like when people who aren't very comfortable in a multimedia environment try to say, well, I guess we have to do it in video, a lot of times it isn't very well executed. So what I always tell people is this: there is some element of social media that you really like as a person. Maybe it's writing, maybe it's pictures, maybe it's audio, maybe it's video, maybe it's chat, maybe it's something else. Whatever you like to do best, that's probably where your show should live, at least initially. Because one thing I know to be true, if you don't love a particular platform or a particular type of content, the chance of you being really good at that are not very high.
Exactly. I think that's a really great point. Let your passion shine through your work, right? And you're going to do that by things that you naturally are passionate about. My one more follow-up on that I want to bring up is that, like, all intents and purposes, sometimes these things just don't work out for us, right?
For sure.
Don't necessarily have the grab that we want, you know, for whatever reason we failed to hit the mark on it. Obviously there's learning, and that's a valuable thing you can always take away from any environment and to get the value from it. But how much do you think, is there a formula, at least an initial formula that says you should at least do 12 episodes? You should at least try out these things, give it this far. How far do you go before you feel like you have the information? And what point do you say this isn't working for me, or this needs to fundamentally change?
It's a great question. I don't know that there is a formula per se, because it depends on the type of program it is and frankly, your goals and objectives. I would say that you have to think of it, again, to use this TV network analogy. You know how many pilots are shot every year for television networks that never go beyond pilot? Or they show the pilot and, like, you know what, that show is actually not very good. We're not going to order any more episodes. Look, I create shows all the time. In lots of cases, I'll do 6 episodes, 10, 20, and either it's not working how I want it to work, or it just kind of plays itself out. Now, conversely, there's shows like Social Pros, which have 450 episodes of. So you don't necessarily know. But I'll tell you the most important thing, Brent, is understanding what your actual success metrics are before you start. And it's one of the things that I think people have a really hard time with. It's like, well, they say, well, the show's not working. Well, Okay, well, what are you using to determine that? Well, I just don't feel like enough people are watching. Like, well, a feeling isn't a success metric, right? Like, where's your Excel spreadsheet of feelings? So you have to initially understand, as I mentioned, what are the CTAs and what are the KPIs for each type of show, right? Are you trying to get subscribers? Well, then measure that. Are you trying to get views? Measure that. Are you trying to get leads? Measure that. So be very clear on what you're actually trying to achieve, and that will help you decide whether or not you're doing that. And I would say this to simplify this answer. If 2 out of every 3 episodes are showing improved results, you should probably give it some more time, right? If the trend line starts to go down over time, then perhaps it's like, you know what, maybe this doesn't have as much legs as we thought. And I'll tell you the other thing, your audience will tell you, right? If you really and truly listen to your audience, they will tell you how to make a better show or what kind of show you should do instead.
Do you feel that a lot of shows end up failing because they weren't necessarily set up properly by having the right goals in place, or because they're not able to accomplish the goals with the medium they're creating? Like, I know what you're saying. I don't think the failure is rooted in poor goal setting. I think your own assessment of its success is threatened by poor goal setting. I think typically why shows fail, as I mentioned a bit in my presentation, most of the time shows fail is because they're too broad, not too narrow, right? You're trying to reach too big of an audience and you're giving them something that they kind of like, instead of a smarter move is have a narrower audience and give them exactly what they want. And that's one of the areas where social media and shows, as Mary knows so well, is very, very similar to search-oriented content, right? That topical authority and topical depth is going to beat out topical breadth every single time. Awesome. So Mary, I'm going to switch up and move on to a couple questions for you real quick that were specific from your presentation. There's an interesting discussion in here. I think that, a lot of what you're saying really resonates with people. I don't want to sound negative in saying this, but it seems common sense, right? It's just, why wouldn't you do this thing, right? Yeah. But why wouldn't you approach it in this way? Why wouldn't you talk to people like real people? Why wouldn't you engage with people like real people? Some industries get really tough on this. Do you have any ideas on how, for example, a healthcare industry can participate in this way, where sometimes their comments can be, and I don't know if this is necessarily the meaning of the question from Sarah Boyd, but one of the audience members who's asking, but let me expand a little further and say some of the times these industries have sensitive rules in place about how they can speak. So do you have any ideas for healthcare that you could, kind of elaborate that might benefit everyone?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I would almost sort of take a bit of what Jay was saying there in the what's your objective with what you're doing, right? So social media is not really a space that I would say is used to be a medical source of information. People are probably going to go to a website and get further information beyond Facebook. You have to really have a clear purpose of what your profile is there for. And likely it's there to create a community around your clinic or your service or whatever it is. So I would say that really the best approach to take is go, what can I provide to my community that they need and that they want and that they can engage with? And if you have a clear objective, then you can create the content for that. And then it's easy to have a conversation because you're just talking about, whether it's a help article or even asking people, what are your frustration points with other clinics or, things like that. You can start that conversation.
Absolutely. Now, another area I think that I really resonate with is this concept of make everything a good conversation, right? I forget your exact quote for it. I apologize, but I definitely resonate with that idea. I think that, and Jay, I actually learned this from you, and I've given you credit for this in so many conversations, that only about 5% of people who are really frustrated speak up. And so, if you have these concerns and you're thinking, I'm just not going to mention them, I'm not going to engage with them, you need to realize that there are significantly higher people that share that same concern that just have not voiced their opinion. And I remember that from your book a long time ago when we talked about it on our podcast once. Yep. And so I think that's brilliant. But Mary, when you're dealing with somebody who is either just trolling, or let's say, for instance, they just can't get past their anger point and they want to continue to debate. How do you defuse? How do you, kind of avoid being a part of the problem, in a sense, by engaging with somebody who's just looking to spin you out?
Well, the first thing that I always recommend is trying to pull the conversation off of the public space. So, acknowledging the concern and then saying, hey, we'd really like to have a conversation with you. Can you send us a private message, or here's our email, or whatever? So first and foremost, try and have the conversation away from public eye, because people tend to react a little stronger when everyone's sort of cheering them on, if that is the case. So yeah, first and foremost, try and pull it out of the public space. Sometimes they'll keep coming back for more. I had a client recently where a woman, she started posting negative comments on other people's positive reviews and recommendations. And we finally hit the point where we decided to start hiding her comments. We replied. She doesn't know that ever happened. We said, hey, we don't think this is appropriate space. And we gave her examples of all the times that we have reached out and tried to rectify the issue that she was complaining about. And then we just, hide. And sometimes you do have to get to that point. But number one, I always say, if you can reply and respond, number one, do that, because people get more and more angry the more and more ignored that they feel. So. Yeah,
and I think it's been stated as well through some of the stats that, and I found this really interesting historically, working with people. A friend of mine who had a solution at a large search engine for customer support and opening tickets. A lot of times people just want to be heard, and simply listening to them like a human being will significantly change the interaction. Quickly, I ran a TikTok campaign on Reddit, and I didn't realize that TikTok was the most hated app on Reddit. And it's crazy to watch 300, 400 comments within 5 minutes about how I could go and end my life, from all the Redditors. How quickly, after about 2 or 3 hours, once we start putting a name to the account, like, oh, you're really making Margaret over here kind of sad, John's cool, but Margaret's kind of bummed. Once they started feeling like there was people there, they really chilled out and started even apologizing and editing quotes. So definitely engaging is something extremely valuable. Dive back into a little bit on shows. And I want to drive back to this point because, Jay, we have a lot of questions specifically about, I've created a show, but I feel like in the way that I share my show, I don't want to annoy people, spam them, or something like that. I know that some of these may be just rules that apply to any sort of sharing or any sort of, production, but specifically in the idea of having a continuous post and wanting to get exposure, is there a baseline? Is there a sense of like what's too much, what's not enough, like what's perfect as far as how much you would announce your show or share it?
It depends on the platform, obviously, right? So, and how the algorithm works. More than one post a day about the same thing on Instagram will likely be viewed as too much just because of the nature of that algorithm. Twitter, because the atomic half-life, if you will, of a tweet is much shorter, less than an hour typically, you could actually talk about a particular show episode more than once a day on Twitter, and you probably should do that. Facebook's probably somewhere in between. So what you want to do is come up with a promotional cadence for each show. And typically what we try to do on my team is have a couple of days between promotion. So one of my podcasts is called Standing Ovation. It's a show about professional speaking. And we typically promote a new episode on Wednesday, and we talk about it in all the social media places. And then we talk about it on Friday. So there's a day in between on all the social media places. And then we usually have a weekend email that we send out to our whole list about all the things that we're doing. And we mention it there as well. So it's not so much about the total number of times that you talk about things. It's just making sure that they're not jammed together in such a small window that people are like, all right, bro, enough. I've already heard about that.
Is there a sort of statistical analysis that would tell you that you're starting to see a decline? I mean, is there like a reduction in comments or a reduction in shares or a reduction in?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could easily run that analysis mathematically if you chose to do so. There's many tools out there that could help you perform that. But I think just anecdotally, if you look at your posts, similar to whether the show is viable going forward or not, and you say, geez, here's the deal. We're getting 10% fewer likes every single time we talk about this. Well, that probably gives you some indication that the audience is not that enthralled. Now, it could be that the algorithm is just not showing your posts to as many people. It could be that the graphics that you're using to promote the episode are not optimized either. So there's other things that could be involved, which is why, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here, Brent, but when you're trying to figure out whether or not your promotional schedule is viable, it's sometimes best to put a little bit of paid dollars behind that, because you can control the reach more in that environment than you can in a purely organic social environment. So instead of just throwing yourselves to the algorithmic wolves, invest a few dollars in a paid campaign, especially in the debut of a show, so you can get a better sense of what's working and actually create 2 or 3 different promotional elements to see which one is most effective.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point on that, because a lot of times people don't really like, they'll say, what's the value of growing a big Facebook fan page? Because when I'm there, I don't get as much engagement in my post. But I don't think they think about the fact that you have a really targeted channel to then advertise to for much lower dollars than if you're just randomly posting across all of Facebook. And that in itself is almost like building your own retargeting.
Yeah, it's a means to an end, man. Like creating a show, especially a broad top of the funnel show, is not a way you're going to sell something, not typically, but it is a way you're going to build an audience and trust that then allows you to sell something downstream in a different form or fashion.
Beautiful. Mary, interesting question came in. How do you deal with people's comments on social when English is not their first language?
Good question.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting one. And I've run into it not a ton of times, but a little bit. And I am an English speaker. I unfortunately don't have a lot of skills in other languages, though I've tried heroically poorly. So I tend to just reach out and explain that. I'll say, I'm using a translator, and I'll just literally do that. And I'll be like, please excuse me, in whatever way Google Translate helps me to say that. And they're usually really happy that I'm trying. And yeah, it's just, that's the best way that I can sort of deal with it. And that's what I do. And I think so long as you're putting in an effort, not just like ignoring it because it's outside of your comfort zone, it tends to go over fairly well.
Awesome. Great point there. I do want to ask one more question, and that's, really when it looks like you're coming into how you approach handling, growing your social presences, right? We've talked about different content and how to interact with the audience, but I mean, a lot of people create these social channels and they don't grow, right? And it's hard for them to grow initially, and maybe they do or don't have the revenue dollars. But what are some basic, can you each of you maybe give me one real quick, just because we're kind of running out of time, but one quick tip that you think people should resonate within their mind to be able to grow their community, to get more people to come and like them?
I don't know do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I'll give you 1.5. First would be smarter about using hashtags. People use hashtags to discover things they're not aware of. So be smarter and more strategic about hashtag usage. And the other one is, if you create content that's about people instead of about your business, typically it will work better over time because people care about people more than they care about business.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I would second that. And I had the one slide, just the sort of 50-50 rule that I like to use, and really trying to keep that promotional stuff more into the ad space and use your profile more in just your community building and make it a place people want to be. Think about the profiles you engage with. Do you go to a brand page and sit there and go, oh, really happy to learn about, whatever ads you're throwing at me? You don't go, none of us do that. So just try and think of the pages and profiles that you like to be a part of. Recreate that.
Well, we've kind of run out of time. I've taken us right to the end. We had a lot more questions, but hopefully people can interact and follow both Jay and Mary.
We're easy to find.
They're easy to find. Yeah. Reach out, talk to them. We're going to take a 20-minute break. I highly encourage you take the time to go and play with the networking function. Go check out and explore some of the expo booths, but make sure you meet with us back here at 6:05 p.m. We will be joined by Perna and Susan, who will have some great sessions for us. So thank you both for your time, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks.